Museum of Unfinished Things. Welcome. Let your body settle into wherever you are. Let the weight of everything you carried today set itself down. Take one slow breath in. Hold it gently and let it go. Tonight, we are going somewhere that does not exist on any map, but that you may have felt before. In the middle of a sentence you never finished. In a song that stopped before its last note. In the particular ache of something almost said. Close your eyes. This is the story of the Museum of Unfinished Things. Chapter 1. The Museum. There is a museum in a city that sits between cities. Not beside them or beneath them, but between. In the way that certain things exist in the space between other things. The pause between two words. The moment between sleeping and waking. The held breath between the question and the answer. The city has no name that maps agree on. It appears differently to everyone who finds it. Some say it looks like Prague in autumn. Some say it looks like a version of Lisbon that got slightly lost. Some say it looks like nowhere they have ever been and everywhere they have always wanted to go. But the museum is always the same. A long, low building of pale stone, older than the city around it, and somehow older than stone itself. Its windows are tall and arched, and the light that comes through them is always the light of late afternoon. That particular golden hour light that makes everything it touches look as though it has been carefully considered and found beautiful. Above the entrance, carved into the stone in letters that are almost too weathered to read, The Museum of Unfinished Things. And beneath that, smaller, in a different hand, as though added later by someone who felt the original inscription needed a companion. Nothing here is lost, only resting. The museum's keeper is a woman named Alma. She has been here for a long time, though she would be difficult to place in age if you tried. She is one of those people who seems to exist slightly outside the ordinary progression of years. Not ageless exactly, but age fluid, the way certain pieces of music are timeless, the way certain rooms feel both ancient and immediate. Her hair is dark with threads of silver that she has never thought about enough to count. Her eyes are the particular brown of very old wood, warm and deep and full of grain. Her hands are careful hands, the hands of someone who handles precious things all day and has developed a relationship with care itself. She opens the museum every morning at the hour between night and day. Not dawn exactly, earlier, the hour when the dark has decided to leave, but the light has not yet arrived. When the sky is the color of something between navy and gray that has no good name. She unlocks the great front door with a key that is always warm in her hand, regardless of the temperature, and begins her day among the unfinished things. Chapter 2. The Collection. The museum has many rooms. Alma had never counted them. She had tried once, in her early years here, walking through the building with a small notebook, recording each room as she entered. But she had always lost count somewhere around the 13th room. Not because she was distracted, but because the rooms themselves seemed to shift. New ones appearing where she had not expected them. Familiar ones rearranging themselves into different sequences, as though the museum were a living thing that had its own ideas about how to be organized. She had stopped trying to count. The rooms simply were what they were, and she had come to know them the way you know a place you have lived in long enough. Not by map, but by feel, by the particular quality of each room's light and its smell, and the way the floor sounded under her feet. The first room was the room of half-written letters. They were displayed in long, shallow cases of glass. Each letter opened flat, the writing visible. And always, the writing stopped mid-sentence, mid-word sometimes, as though the writer had been called away by something urgent and had simply never returned. Dear Mother, I want to tell you that I have been thinking about what you said, and I believe you were. My darling, I am sorry for the thing I said last Tuesday. I did not mean it the way it. To whoever reads this, I want you to know that the most important thing I ever learned was Alma walked this room slowly every morning, reading each letter as though for the first time, though she had read them all hundreds of times. She read them because they needed to be read. She believed this completely, that unfinished things needed witnesses, that a half-written letter left unread was something close to a second abandonment. She read them all, every morning, without hurry. The second room was the room of abandoned paintings. Canvases everywhere, on the walls, on easels, leaning against each other in gentle stacks. Each one beautiful in its incompleteness. A face with one eye finished and the other only suggested. A landscape with a foreground of extraordinary detail dissolving into unpainted canvas. A still life with 3 objects rendered perfectly and the 4th merely sketched in pencil. Waiting. The third room was the room of forgotten songs. This was Alma's favorite. It was smaller than the others and shaped differently, oval rather than rectangular, and the acoustics in it were extraordinary. When you stood in the center and breathed, you could hear them. Not loudly, not insistently, but present. The ghost melodies of songs that had been begun and not completed, that had reached their second verse or their bridge or their chorus, and then stopped, still searching for their ending. Alma would stand in the center of this room each morning and simply listen. And the songs would move around her like warm water. There were rooms for unfinished novels, the first chapters of books that would never have their second. Rooms for abandoned scientific theories. Rooms for half-built models. Rooms for projects of every kind that had been put down one day and never picked back up. And there was one room at the very back of the museum, the one she saved for last on her morning rounds. The smallest room, with no windows, only a single lamp that burned amber and steady. The room of things almost said. Not letters or songs or paintings, nothing so concrete. This room held the words that had lived only in minds and mouths and had never quite made it into the world. Words stopped by fear or timing or the sudden ringing of a telephone or the ordinary cowardice of not quite being brave enough. Words that had hovered at the edge of being spoken and then retreated. The room of things almost said was always full. It was the fullest room in the museum, and standing in it, Alma always felt the most. Chapter 3. How Alma Came to Be Here. She had not applied for the position. There had been no advertisement, no interview, no letter of appointment on official stationery. She had simply arrived one morning. She had been 29 years old, and she had been walking through a city she did not know particularly well, a city she had come to for reasons she no longer remembered. And she had turned a corner and found the museum in front of her, and had walked through its open door the way you walk toward warmth when you are cold, without making a decision about it, simply moving toward the thing the body recognizes as right. The previous keeper had been waiting for her, an old man, very thin, with white hair and eyes the color of winter sky, who had looked at her when she walked through the door and said simply, "There you are," as though he had been expecting her, as though her arrival was the conclusion of something he had been waiting a long time to see completed. He had shown her the rooms, all of them, spending a full day walking her through the collection, explaining without explaining, describing without defining, letting the things themselves do the teaching. In the room of half-written letters, he had said, "These need to be read every day, not because reading them changes anything, but because the act of being witnessed is itself a kind of completion." In the room of abandoned paintings, he had said, "Look at what is there, not at what is missing. The missing part is not an absence. It is a door the painting left open." In the room of forgotten songs, he had said nothing at all. He had simply stood beside her in the oval space and let her hear them, and watched her face as she did, and nodded once, slowly, as though her expression told him everything he needed to know. At the end of the day, he had pressed the key into her hand. It was warm, she represented. Warm in the way that things are warm when they have been held for a long time by someone who loved them. "I'll be going now," he had said. "It's yours." And he had walked out the front door, and she had never seen him again. She had not been frightened. She had been ready, she realized, in a way she had not known she was ready until the readiness was required. She had locked up that first evening, stood on the front steps in the between the city's air, looked up at the almost too weathered to read inscription above the door, and felt, for the first time in a long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Chapter 4. The Visitors. The museum received visitors, not many, and not on any predictable schedule. They arrived the way the museum itself arrived, unexpectedly, turning a corner in a city between cities and finding themselves in front of something they had not known they were looking for. They were always, without exception, people who had left something unfinished themselves. Alma had understood this slowly over her early years, watching the visitors and noticing the pattern. The way a person's face in the half-written letters room would sometimes change, a particular recognition settling over their features. Not quite guilt and not quite grief, but something between the two. The expression of someone confronting something they had been not thinking about for a very long time. She never asked them what they had left unfinished. She had learned early that asking was wrong, that the museum worked best when it was simply present, when she was simply present, and the visitors were allowed to move through at their own pace and stop at the things they needed to stop at and feel what they needed to feel without being guided toward it. She was the keeper, not the teacher, not the therapist, not the guide. The keeper. She kept the place, kept it clean and warm and open, kept the letters read and the paintings lit and the songs audible, kept the lamp burning in the room of things almost said. And the visitors came and moved through and left, usually quietly, usually changed in some small way that was visible if you were paying attention. They left lighter, not happy necessarily, not fixed, but lighter. The way you feel lighter after saying something true, even when the truth is difficult. The way you feel lighter after crying properly, rather than almost crying for days. They left as though something had been acknowledged, something that had been hovering at the edge of being felt, finally felt. Alma watched them go and felt a particular satisfaction, quiet and warm, the satisfaction of a work done well, of a purpose being served. Chapter 5. The Painting. On a Tuesday in what felt like autumn, a woman came in who was different from the usual visitors. Most visitors moved through the rooms slowly and somewhat tentatively, as though they were not entirely sure they were allowed to be there, as though the museum might at any moment realize its mistake and ask them to leave. This woman walked in as though she had been there before, or as though she belonged to the category of people who feel at home in museums on principle. She was perhaps 50, with paint-stained fingers and the particular focused look of someone who sees things in layers, the surface of a thing and also what is underneath. She moved through the first rooms quickly, not dismissively, but with the practiced efficiency of someone who knows what they are looking for. She stopped in the room of abandoned paintings and stood in front of a canvas that Alma had always found particularly affecting. It was large, perhaps 4 feet by 3, and it showed a garden in summer, painted with extraordinary skill. The foreground a riot of specific, beautiful detail. Each flower named by its rendering, each blade of grass individually considered. The middle ground also complete. A stone wall with climbing roses, a wooden gate standing open. But the background, where the garden should have opened into sky, was bare canvas, untouched, waiting. The woman stood in front of it for a very long time. Alma, who had been quietly tidying a nearby shelf, became aware of the quality of the woman's stillness. It was not the stillness of study, it was the stillness of recognition. Finally, the woman said, without turning around, as though she knew Alma was there, I know who painted this. Alma came to stand beside her. My mother, the woman said. She started it the summer I was 12, in the garden of the house we lived in then. She worked on it every day that summer. I used to watch her. She said she was saving the sky for last because she wanted to get it exactly right. She said the sky was the most important part because everything in a garden reaches toward it. She paused. She died in September, the woman said, before she finished the sky. They stood together in front of the painting, the garden reaching upward into bare canvas, still waiting, still reaching. I never knew what happened to it, the woman said. After the house was sold, I thought it was gone. Alma said nothing. There was nothing to say that the painting was not already saying. After a long while, the woman turned to look at her. Does it? She began, and then stopped, and then tried again. Is it finished in some way, even without the sky? Alma looked at the painting. She thought about what the old keeper had told her on that first day. Look at what is there, not at what is missing. The missing part is not an absence. It is a door the painting left open. She thought about the garden reaching upward. Everything in a garden reaches toward it, the woman's mother had said. And the sky, Alma thought, in this painting was everything above the frame, everything beyond the canvas, infinite and implied, and more present for being unseen than any painted sky could ever be. Yes, Alma said. In a way, I think it might be the most finished painting here. The woman looked at her. Then she looked back at the painting, and something in her face, quietly, like a window opening in a closed room, changed. Chapter 6. The Song. A man came in on a winter morning, young, perhaps 25, with the particular exhaustion of someone who has not slept well in a long time and has begun to forget what sleeping well felt like. He found his way to the room of forgotten songs without Alma directing him, as though the room had called him specifically. He stood in the center of the oval space and went very still. Alma watched from the doorway. His face, as he heard the songs moving through the room, was extraordinary. She had seen many faces in this room over the years, awe and sadness and recognition and grief, and the particular bittersweet feeling that has no single-word name in most languages. But this face was something she had not quite seen before. It was the face of someone hearing their own work. She knew it before he said anything, the way you sometimes know things about people before they speak, because the body tells you what the voice has not yet decided to. After a long time, he said, "Is that mine?" She came to stand beside him. "I wrote it when I was 19, he said. "I was writing it for my brother. He was sick, and I wanted to write him something, and I got as far as—" He paused. "Do you hear the one that goes?" He hummed a few notes, a rising phrase, simple and clear and heartbreaking in its simplicity. "Yes," Alma said. "I hear it." "Also, could never find the ending," he said. "I tried for months. I had the beginning and the middle, and then it would stop, like there was a wall. He shook his head. My brother got better, which is the important thing. He's fine now. But the song... He listened to the ghost of his own melody circling the oval room. Is it okay here? He asked. Is it looked after? Alma felt something warm move through her chest. It's heard every day, she said. I stand here every morning and listen to all of them. He was quiet for a long time. I could never finish it because I didn't know how the story ended, he said. I was writing it when I didn't know if he was going to be okay. The song was from that place, from not knowing. He listened to the unresolved melody. Maybe that's why it doesn't have an ending, he said slowly. Maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe a song written in not knowing should sound like not knowing. Maybe the unresolved part is the most honest part. He looked at Alma. Is that allowed? She smiled. She thought of the half-written letters, of the painting with its infinite implied sky, of the room of things almost said, and how it was always the fullest room. Unfinished things, she said, are some of the most honest things we make, because they show us exactly where we were when we stopped. They are maps of a moment. They say, this is how far I could go. This is where I was. He was quiet for a while longer. Then he said, my brother would have liked this place. Bring him some time, Alma said. He looked at her, surprised. Anyone can come, she said. The door is open. Chapter 7. The Letters. Of all the rooms, the room of half-written letters was the one that received the most visitors who came back. Not once, but twice, 3 times, sometimes many times over many years, returning to stand in front of the same letters they had stood in front of before. Sometimes the same letter over and over, as though each visit offered something the previous visit had not. Alma had thought about this. She had come to believe that unfinished letters were the most intimate objects in the museum, more intimate even than the almost said things in the back room. Because a letter, however unfinished, had been given form, had been committed to paper, had crossed the border from thought to word, even if it had never crossed the further border from word to recipient. There was a letter she returned to herself every morning, the last one in the 3rd case on the left. It was written in a hand she had come to love over years of daily reading, precise and small and slightly hurried, the hand of someone whose thoughts moved faster than their pen. It said, I have been trying to write this for 6 months, and I keep stopping because I don't know how to say the thing I mean without saying it wrong. What I mean is that the years since you left have been not bad. I don't want you to think they have been bad because they haven't been. I have built something here, a life that is genuinely mine and genuinely good. What I mean is that I think of you still, not with longing exactly, but with something I don't have a word for. Gratitude, perhaps? Though that sounds wrong too. The thing I want to say is that loving you taught me how to... And there it stopped. taught me how to. Alma had spent years finishing that sentence in her mind. Taught me how to love. Taught me how to be alone. Taught me how to know what I needed. Taught me how to be myself. She never settled on one ending. She thought perhaps that was correct, that the letter's writer had not settled on one ending either. That the sentence was unfinished because the thing it was trying to say was not one thing, but many things, a constellation of things, and that putting one word at the end would have collapsed the constellation into a single point and lost the rest. The unfinished sentence held all its possible endings simultaneously, like the painting's sky, like the song that knew it was from not knowing and was honest about it. She read the letter every morning, and every morning it meant something slightly different, and every morning she was grateful for it. Chapter 8. What Alma Believed. She had been keeping the museum for a long time when she first tried to articulate to herself what she believed about the things in her care. She was sitting in the room of forgotten songs one evening, after the last visitor had gone, in the quiet that settled over the museum at the end of each day like a blanket, warm and particular and entirely its own. The songs moved around her. She thought about the woman and her mother's painting, about the young man and his song for his brother, about the letter that ended with, "Taught me how to." She thought about all the people who had walked through the museum's door and moved through its rooms and left changed in their quiet way. And she thought about what all these things had in common. They were all acts of love, she realized. Every unfinished thing in the museum, without exception, had been started because someone loved something or someone enough to try to make something, to try to capture or express or give or say or build or paint or write or sing something that felt important. Something that felt like it needed to exist in the world. And they had not finished for 1,000 different reasons. Time and fear and death and the imperfect match between what we feel and what we are able to make. The gap between the thing we carry inside us and the thing we can get onto canvas or paper or into sound. But the attempt was there. The love was there, completely and entirely there, in every brushstroke of the garden that reached toward an unpainted sky, in every note of the melody that did not know its own ending, in every word of every letter that stopped mid-sentence, reaching for the right word and never quite finding it. The love was finished, even when the thing was not. She sat with this thought for a long time in the oval room, the songs circling her, and felt, in a way she had not felt in years, the particular warmth of understanding something true. She took out her own small notebook, the one she kept in her coat pocket, and she wrote it down. The thing is never the love. The thing is just how far the love got before the world got in the way. And the love is always complete. Chapter 9. A Letter to the Visitors. She wrote it one morning in spring, not in the half-written letter room, but at the small desk in her office at the back of the museum, the desk where she kept the administrative things, the records of donations, the maintenance schedules, the quiet paperwork of a place that existed slightly outside ordinary systems but still required ordinary systems to function. She wrote it by hand, in her careful handwriting, on a piece of the museum's cream stationery. And when she had finished, she read it through once and folded it and carried it to the room of half-written letters and placed it in a new case at the end of the room, open, so it could be read. It said, "To everyone who has ever left something unfinished, I want to tell you something I have learned from years of keeping the things you left behind. Your unfinished thing is not a failure. It is evidence. Evidence that you tried, that you cared enough to begin, that you loved something or someone enough to attempt to make something in response to that love. The gap between what you felt and what you were able to make is not a measure of your shortcoming. It is a measure of the size of what you felt. The bigger the love, the harder it is to finish, because the love is larger than any finished thing can hold. Your half-written letter is a complete love in an incomplete form. Your abandoned painting is a complete vision that ran out of time. Your forgotten song is a complete feeling that could not yet find its last note. I keep these things because they deserve to be kept, because they are the most honest evidence we leave of what we were and what we felt and what we tried. Every morning, I read the letters and look at the paintings and listen to the songs and stand in the room of things almost said, and I feel nothing but tenderness toward the people who made them. Please feel the same tenderness toward yourself. You tried. That is the whole of it. That is everything. With love from the keeper, Alma. Chapter 10. The New Visitor. Many years after she had come to keep the museum, on a morning in early autumn when the light through the arched windows was especially beautiful, a young woman came in. She was perhaps 29, and she carried with her the particular quality that Alma recognized by now immediately, the quality of someone who had left something unfinished that they had been not thinking about for a very long time. She moved through the rooms slowly, carefully, stopping at things that caught her. In the room of half-written letters, she stood for a long time in front of a letter that began, "My dearest friend, I want you to know that the years we spent apart were not years I spent not thinking about you, but years I spent thinking about you differently." In the room of abandoned paintings, she stopped at a small canvas, barely 12 inches square, showing a kitchen table set for two. One place setting fully rendered, the other only sketched. She spent a long time in the room of forgotten songs, and then she came to the room at the very back, the smallest room with the amber lamp, the room of things almost said. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she came in. Alma was in the corner, quiet, not wanting to disturb. The young woman stood in the center of the room, and Alma watched her face. There it was, the thing she always watched for, the softening, the recognition, the particular expression of someone in the presence of something they had been carrying alone and have just discovered is not theirs alone at all, is in fact shared, has always been shared. The young woman reached into her bag. She took out a piece of paper, folded, and held it for a moment. Then she looked at Alma. "Can I?" she said. Alma understood. "Of course," she said. The young woman placed the folded paper on the small shelf that ran along the wall of the room. The shelf Alma had installed years ago for exactly this purpose, because people needed somewhere to put the things they had been carrying. She stepped back, looked at the paper on the shelf.
"It is a letter," the young woman said. "I have been trying to send it for 2 years. I don't know if I will ever send it, but I needed it to be somewhere that would keep it." "It will be kept," Alma said. The young woman nodded and breathed out slowly, completely, the exhalation of someone who has set down something heavy. "Thank you," she said. She walked back through the rooms, through the letters and the paintings and the songs, and out the great front door. Alma went to the shelf and looked at the folded paper. She did not unfold it. Not yet. She would read it in the morning during her rounds, but for now, she simply placed her hand gently on it, the way you place a hand on a shoulder. "Welcome," she said quietly, "to nothing and everything. You are exactly where you belong." Closing. And so the museum kept its hours, in the city between cities, where the light through the arched windows was always the light of late afternoon, and the songs circled the oval room, and the letters waited to be read, and the paintings reached toward their implied skies. Alma opened the doors each morning at the hour between night and day, and walked her rounds, reading and looking and listening, keeping the things that needed to be kept, witnessing the things that needed to be witnessed. Visitors came and went, each one turning a corner and finding the museum as though it had been waiting specifically for them, which it had, which it always had. They left lighter. They left with the particular quality of people who have been reminded of something true. That the thing they left unfinished was not a measure of their failure, but of the size of what they felt. That the love was always complete, even when the thing was not. That nothing here is lost, only resting. And now, here in the quiet dark where you are, I want to ask you something gently. What is your unfinished thing? Not to make you feel guilty about it, not to suggest you need to go back and complete it, but simply to acknowledge it, to let it be present for a moment, to say, yes, I started that, I tried, I cared enough to begin. Maybe it is a letter you never sent. Maybe it is a conversation you never finished. Maybe it is something you made that you put down one day and never picked back up. Maybe it is something you almost said to someone you love. Something that hovered at the edge of being spoken and then retreated. Whatever it is in the museum. It is kept. It is read and looked at and listened to every morning by someone who feels nothing but tenderness toward the person who made it. You tried. That is the whole of it. And the love behind the trying, the love that made you start, that love was never unfinished. It was never unfinished at all. Let that be enough tonight. Let it be more than enough. You are loved, quietly, completely, in all your beautiful incompleteness. Sleep now. Good night.